Welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is Naomi Comfort. Naomi is an attorney, has her own law firm, Silicon Valley Elder Law, which is a professional corporation. She's taught continuing education courses on fiduciary income taxation and other subjects for CPAs, attorneys, and the public. And Naomi and I have shared the podium together on some of these seminars, and also she's been a guest a number of times on this show. So Naomi, welcome back. We're love having you here on Financial Insider Weekly.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Today, Naomi and I are going to be talking about some tax planning issues for elders and their caregivers. And as I get started here, I just want to caution our viewers again that we're just covering some highlights of complex legal areas. And so these things you need to have customized for your own situation. Each person is a little different. We also have different laws in different states, so be aware of that. We're in California. Naomi is a California attorney. I'm a California CPA. Our rules here are a little different from other states. So get professional help. See your elder law attorney, estate planning attorney, CPA, and other advisors. Okay, Naomi, let's get started. So what are some tax issues that should be addressed or considered by an elder law attorney when counseling his or her clients?
Well, Mike, for decades, the focus of our estate planning when it came to taxes was the estate and gift tax regime.
Mm-hmm.
And with the passage recently of these higher exemptions, $5 million for each person for estate and gift taxes, the majority of Americans don't need to structure their estate plan or their long-term care plan around estate and gift tax issues, because most of the people in the U.S. don't have estates that exceed $5 million or $10 million for a couple. So we've been able to adjust our practices and focus on primarily on client goals first, other than taxes. But when it comes to taxes, we are still looking at mitigating income taxes. So we're looking at the income tax issues as they apply to our clients, and going forward with our long-term care, how we can mitigate the tax exposure overall for the elder, for the person who's chronically ill, and for the whole family.
Okay. So when you're dealing with long-term care and so forth, what kind of care costs are deductible? And so I'm your client, I'm over 65 years old, getting awfully close to that. And my granddaughter's living with me for the summer. I pay her to clean the house, do laundry, help me out. Is that deductible?
Oh, you have a good granddaughter.
Yeah. Well,
all right, so this
I can't really count on that with my grandkids.
So you're my client, you come in and you might not be able to eat the food, right? And what you're wanting to know is, you basically, your granddaughter's coming to stay with you, and she's going to help you out by cooking and cleaning and some assorted things around the house, and you're going to pay her to do this. And can you deduct that? Is your question. Well, you might be able to. You might be able to, but there are certain requirements that have to be met. So if you are chronically ill, and if your physician or a licensed care provider has prescribed the need for you to have these care services, then the care services are deductible, unless they're provided by a family member.
Right.
Who is not licensed.
Who is not
Any
licensed.
other care provider who's not licensed, you can still deduct the expenses if they were prescribed by your physician or medical provider. And if you're chronically ill, then you can deduct these costs. But if it's your family member that's providing the services and you're paying the family member, you can only deduct them as medical expenses if the family member is licensed. So if your granddaughter is a nurse and she's coming for the summer to help you, and she's doing all these things, and the reason she's helping you is because you have moderately advanced Alzheimer's and you're not able to safely do these things for yourself, and the doctor has said you must have live-in help to provide these services, then yes, that would be a deductible expense.
Yeah. So the trick may be getting the granddaughter licensed, and my granddaughter is only 6 years old, so
she's got a few years to go.
She's got a ways to go yet. Anyway, and I don't know if she'd be willing, but anyway.
So there are certain care costs that are deductible,
right.
Not for the general public, but in certain circumstances, if you need that assistance in the home, it can be a deductible expense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what about nursing home costs?
And whether those are deductible expenses or not.
Yeah.
If you're in a nursing home primarily for medical reasons, then yes, the nursing home costs are fully deductible, even though it also includes room and board. If the primary reason for you being there is because of medical treatment that you need to receive, it's fully deductible. Mm-hmm. If you're there because I can't imagine why else somebody else might be in a nursing home, but maybe you have been discharged from a nursing home, but you have no place to go because your house burned down, or I don't know, some strange circumstances. There might be some situation where you were there still, and it wasn't because of a medical necessity, it was because of some social situation, in which case it would no longer be deductible.
So if the primary reason, though, for you being in this living arrangement isn't for medical care, so say for some assisted living, for example, it may not really be for medical care, although they may have some medical care that's available on the premises.
Correct, and then the medical portion of it is deductible. But if it's a licensed nursing home facility, then that's going to be fully deductible if you're there for medical reasons. If it's not a nursing home level of care and it's just an assisted living or a continuing care retirement community, those are not fully deductible. So even though you're paying $8,000 or $10,000 a month, it's not deductible, whereas if it was the skilled nursing level of care, it is deductible.
Okay. Sometimes that can seem like a fine difference, so something to look into. Again, you may want to have your CPA work with you on that as far as working through the details and so forth.
Absolutely. It's something that when I'm meeting with clients and we're talking about these issues, it's usually the elder is approaching the need for care, and we're looking at the various options and the various dynamics and kind of walking through the next step and the next step and the next step and what the financial repercussions are for each of those. So maybe they're living at home now, receiving some assistance at home, and what portions of that are deductible. Maybe they go from there to assisted living, and then from assisted living to nursing home. And from assisted living, you might be paying $8,000 a month, non-deductible, and then in the nursing home, $8,000 a month, but it's all deductible.
Yeah.
So it does depend on the medical situation and what the doctor prescribes. So it really comes back to whether the doctor has prescribed that level of care as being necessary for you.
Yeah. A lot of times I ask questions to the clients about, what are the capabilities of the person that we're talking about. So if it's a daughter, for example, that's coming to me, her mother is in this center, or a son, and maybe the father. But anyway, this is an example. And and this person basically can't bathe themselves. They need assistance dressing themselves. Can't safely cook for themselves, and so on. And they have other medical requirements that they basically could not live in a residence themselves. Then in most cases they're probably getting to the level of care that it's a medical necessity that they
Right. And the other thing too is it's not just the costs of the actual care. Once you get to the point where it's going to be deductible, it's not just the costs of the actual care, but for example, if you had to add on a room to your house so that there was like a granny unit, but so the care provider could stay, so you could have somebody 24/7. The costs for that are going to be, some of that will be deductible, if not all of it. Your increase in your utility bill for having the extra person around, is deductible because the person's there because of a medical necessity. So there's lots and lots of other bits and pieces that can be deductible. And so again, as you mentioned, it's very important as you're stepping into these huge expenses, talk with your tax advisor to understand the parameters of what's deductible and what's not. Because if it is only deductible if the doctor says you have to have it, then go get that doctor's prescription saying you have to have it, because probably if you're doing it, you have to have it. So it's good to have that knowledge up front so that as you're moving forward with your plans to care for somebody who needs assistance, you can take advantage of the tax codes as they are written.
But again, just trying to conclude a little bit on this, but there are expenses, like if you're in a nursing home, okay, for example, your meals are deductible. I mean, it's just included.
Everything in the nursing
so
home.
So everything in that nursing home is going to be deductible, like you said, even the rent and so on. Whereas if you were staying at home and having this care, then those expenses would not be deductible.
Correct.
So it is sort of an advantage of the nursing home type of care.
Which again, offset by a bunch of other issues. So it's not simply a question of what's deductible, that's what I'm going to do. It's
there's
we're
of
looking at all
issues.
sorts of different issues and where you're going to get the best care too.
Okay. All right. Well, what about long-term care insurance? What do you think the role is here, and as far as from your perspective when you're advising clients?
Long-term care insurance can be really tax advantageous. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. From a tax perspective, it looks really good. Depending on your age, a portion of the premium will be deductible. And depending on the benefits that are being paid out to you, those are usually tax-free. Usually. A lot of the benefits paid out are going to be tax-free. So you're paying in this premium, a portion of which you're going to get a deduction for that expense. When they pay out, it's going to be tax-free. So you're looking at this transaction and saying, well, if I buy the insurance and I actually use it, it's going to be a win-win situation, right? Because I know I'm going to have the resources to pay for the expenses without having to dip into my principal that I've worked so hard to build, and I'll be able to protect my principal. So it's an asset protection type of thing. So I can protect these assets that I've earned to, pass off to my children or to whomever, and this tax-free money is going to come in and pay for my costs of care, right? Mm-hmm. And it is advantageous. But you also want to offset that with considering that if you're in a situation where you need that care and you're paying for it out of pocket, if you need that care, it's going to be deductible. You just have to meet your minimum threshold of the 7.5 or 10% to be able to itemize your deductions. Yeah. And which, if you're needing that level of care, you probably can do. Your income's going to be reduced, and your medical expenses are going to be up. It might not be enough though, and so the advantage again with the long-term care insurance is if it's coming in tax-free, you don't have that 7.5 or 10% floor you've got to meet. It's just tax-free receipts paying for the costs of the care that you need at that time. Right. So whether it's appropriate, it depends on whether you can get it, which depends on your age and your health and how much it costs at that time. And what your long-term financial goals are, because a lot of people who are single and or don't have children that they want to leave their assets to, it's not a big deal for them if their assets are consumed by their costs of care. But when I have a client who in particular has a child who's disabled, they're really concerned about protecting their own assets to be passed on to take care of the disabled child after they pass away. And so for those types of people, the long-term care insurance is really a critical part of their estate planning. Right.
So bear in mind that the long-term care insurance premium, the deductible part, okay, there are limitations.
Depends on your age, right?
Right. And then the other thing, though, is it is included with your medical expenses as part of the medical deduction. So you have to watch, again, that adjusted gross income limitation, and like alternative minimum tax, for example, you've got a 10% floor, and I think that it's being conformed eventually under the healthcare reform. Where
Yes,
it's going to be
that's correct. For starting in 2013, for all individuals who are not 65 years old or who don't have a spouse who's 65 years old, it's now 10% of a adjusted
It does a gross income.
adjusted gross income. If you or your spouse is 65 in the during the tax year that you're looking to make the deductions, then it's still 7.5% is the minimum, and that goes through, I think, 2016, maybe 2019, but it's around for a handful of years, and then it'll go up so that everybody has to meet that 10% threshold before it's deductible.
So healthcare reform is having an impact tax-wise, and so you have to watch some of the changes that are happening there. We have other programs related to that sort of stuff too.
Right. So, and one more point on the long-term care insurance is that when a client comes into my office and we're talking about these things, the attorney, myself, will talk about long-term care insurance and maybe advise the person that it's something to look into, but in California, the attorneys don't sell insurance.
Right.
So I would be referring my clients to their insurer or to an insurance agent who specializes and deals with long-term care insurance to go get some counseling from that person and look at the different policies and options and to make their decision with their insurance agent. It's outside of my scope of my practice. I just alert them to the information and help guide them about the benefits.
So it's sort of a tool to be aware of. By the way, and we do have some interviews that I've done with Peggy Martin. We talked about long-term care insurance. So again, you can find those under some of our past episodes. Keep an eye open for that.
You've talked to everybody about everything.
Oh, well, no, not yet, but anyway, we have covered a lot of things. All right, well, let's see here. So we've talked about then the new limitations. What if mom moves in with me? Oh, this is the one that we all sort of, in a way, we kind of dread. But anyway, but what?
Not from the tax perspective.
No, not from the tax
It's the issue of,
perspective.
oh gosh, mom's moving in. How's that going to
so-
impact my marriage? Really, is the first question, right?
I suppose. Well, and also, how mom and I are going to get along.
Exactly.
So anyway, so besides those other side issues, what about tax deductions related to if mom moves in with me and I have some costs of care there? What can we do there?
If you provided for over half of her support for the year, then your mom is a relative and she's lived with you for the entire year as a part of your household, then those costs that you've paid for directly are going to be deductible for you. This is just the tip of the iceberg, though, on the issues that come up when mom moves in with a child who is supporting mom and taking care of mom. So the tax deductibility of those expenses, if they're paid by the child, if you meet the requirements, they can be deducted by the child.
So what we're basically talking about is medical expenses, care expenses. For example, if you have a caregiver that comes into your home
Correct.
to care for mom that you're paying for. Now, there are side issues, folks, that we haven't talked about, like household employee and so forth. And I don't think we're going to really get into them today. But again, these are things that you need to talk to your tax advisor about because there are side issues. If you're in fact hiring these people yourself rather than just using a service, and is this person going to be your employee, mom's employee, and so forth? Are there payroll requirements that need to be dealt with?
And the big picture issue that comes up in my practice over and over again is how is the child who's caring for mom going to be compensated, if at all?
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, the care provider is giving up space in his or her home. It's very time consuming to care for an elder. It's very emotionally draining to care for an elder. There's so many pieces of, driving them around to their various medical appointments, being on call. It's really a role reversal, right? You're caring for a dependent person. And it could be the family expectation that is just what you do and there's no compensation for that. Mm-hmm. It could be the child's expectation that they are going to get compensated for it, but they're not going to get compensated until after mom dies, because the first the first goal is to make sure that there's enough money to care for mom. So they think that once mom dies, they're going to get paid for all this time that they've spent
Better get it in
taking
writing.
care of. Exactly, exactly. And that's why I bring it up, is we
Yeah.
see some of the ugliest disputes after an elder has passed away are between the child who provided the home and the care and the other siblings. Because if it's not in writing, then it's up for grabs, and it can be very difficult. The person
Yeah.
who's given so much
Yeah.
feels so entitled to compensation, and you know what, they probably deserve it.
Yeah.
Whether they're entitled to it and whether it's appropriate for them to receive compensation is a whole nother story. So there's a lot of counseling that goes into this as I'm working with my clients, looking at, do you give annual gifts to the person, because that's going to be a tax-free transaction if you just give the person that you're living with a gift each year of $10,000 or so. Because if it's actual income for the services that are provided, then of course you've got money going from the elder who's in probably a low tax bracket to the child who is in a higher tax bracket, who's going to have to pay income taxes on those funds, and whether that's the appropriate thing to do or not.
And like we said, that may not be deductible, because if the person's not licensed, it's a family member, they're providing the care.
But it's still income. Even if
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
deductible as a medical
Yeah.
expense, it's still income
Yeah.
to the person who is paid.
So that's a very unhappy sort of a combination. And again, okay, now...
And why
is-
it's so critical to
Yeah.
have these family meetings
Yeah.
and family discussions in advance.
Yeah.
And to make sure everybody understands and is on the same page and understands what's going to happen.
Right. And unfortunately, these are probably the exception rather than the rule. That
The conversation happens?
Yeah, the conversation. So in other words, probably 90% or 95% of the time, it's a cleanup operation after mom or dad has passed away.
Right.
And then it's just really tough, or it can be really tough, depending on the family. So if they're all understanding along the way and they say, yeah, you deserve it and so forth, then that's cool. You can make the agreement. But if not, then you've got a real problem, and definitely people are going to be upset one way or the other. And it's
Right.
probably going to be the one who is taking care of mom.
And you know what? And what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of money paid to the attorneys
Yeah.
to help work
Yeah.
it out. And
Yeah.
so less money again to go to the family, more going outside of the family, which is really not what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to help resolve these things in advance so that the elder's wishes are realized.
Okay. So we've got maybe about 5 minutes left, just to let you know. Okay. So maybe you can sort of tie all this together as far as this process of estate and care planning that you do for your clients.
So when I'm meeting with my clients about the caregiver's role and how the caregiver is going to be recognized, these are all issues that we discuss. We can set up situations where the caregiver is paid each year, if that's what the client decides, or if there isn't liquidity to pay the caregiver each year because the assets are nominal, or maybe they're tied up in real estate or somewhere else that it's not appropriate to be taking a bunch of money out, then it can just be carried forward. And we have a contract that basically sets forth who's going to get paid what, if that's what's going to happen, or we have the care provider sign off on an agreement saying, at this time I'm doing this gratis, it's my family duty, I'm not accepting payment, and that's what everybody's understanding is. We can also modify the estate plan so that the care provider gets a larger portion of the inheritance after mom or the elder has passed away. But there's lots of creative ways to deal with it. It starts with the elder's goals and needs, and then it goes out from there as to, from the tax perspective, how are we going to leverage these transfers of funds between mother and child so that we don't just have negative tax consequences, like the situation where you have the non-deductible medical expense of mom paying daughter for care, but daughter's still got to recognize the income, right? So we're looking at all the different ways that we can clarify things in advance so that people know what's anticipated, what the next steps are, how they're going to be paid for, and at what point it impacts other people financially.
Okay. So, do you maybe have a final thought or two about this area of tax planning for elders and their caregivers?
The important things to remember are really that the caregivers have tax situations that they need to be looking at also. They have exposure. If they're receiving money for what they're doing, it is income and needs to be reported on their own tax returns. And if you have got a caregiver, you have to make a determination of whether that person is an employee, an independent contractor, and what all the reporting requirements are. You want to check with all of your insurance to make sure that all your insurance pieces are tied up so that you don't have any exposure to liability for anything that might happen in the house during that care providing period. Whether it's a family member or a non-family member, you just want to make sure that everybody's protected so that you don't have exposure to liability.
Okay. Naomi, I want to thank you again for joining me today, talking about these very important issues. We have an aging population, darn. Especially we've got a whole generation, my generation, the baby boom generation, that we've already had the first forefront that have gone through age 65, and so we've got a huge bulge in our population that are going to be wrestling with these issues. The good news is at this point, most of them are in pretty good health shape, so now is the time for them to be talking about these things with their attorneys and with their tax advisors and financial planners.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, well folks, hope we've given you something to think about here, very important issues, and we'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.